Welcome to the committee, Representative Green. You have House File 3157, and I'm going to move to re-refer that bill, House File 3157, to the General Register.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and committee members. Yes, House File 3157 is before you. It is a pretty simple bill, but it's a very important bill. It was brought to me about a year and a half ago. The issue was, and so I've been looking into it for a long time, trying to get input from different folks, and it's about misrepresenting the service dogs, and we have a number of testifiers, and I would like to see if they want to come forward before we get into too much discussion. But the bill in general just, it's a two-tiered penalty. The first offense is a petty misdemeanor, and if you have a second offense, it moves to a misdemeanor, and you could be required to do community service. And the bill will allow people to post on their place of businesses that misrepresenting a service animal is a crime, and it also gives the Council on Disability the authority to design a poster that would go on to a business that they could have. That's the short version of the bill. So, Mr. Chair, I'd appreciate the conversation.
Terry Craig?
Good morning.
Good morning. Welcome to
Still
the
morning.
committee.
Yeah.
If you could please state your name for the record. And
Sure, my
speak
name
in
is
your testimony.
Terry Crake, K-R-A-K-E. I am in support of Representative Green's order here. I think that in the beginning, service dogs were mostly guide dogs, and that's what people are used to seeing. But there's a variety of them out there now. I, too, was an officer of the law, so I'm pretty well aware of Minnesota statutes. I teach the Minneapolis police on service dog awareness, so I've gone through all 900 officers, and we now do academies before they hit the street. But I think that what's happened to me is Brody has been bitten by a service dog wearing a vest that they got online. I kicked the dog, unfortunately, but I wasn't going to have him injure my dog any more than he did. He did draw blood. The lady finally said that it was a therapy dog. Therapy dogs are not allowed access. So we have therapy dogs, we have emotional assist dogs. They're only allowed in their house. Therapy dogs are only allowed to go to hospitals that they're assigned to, or elementary schools for reading with the kids and stuff. But a service animal has full access. He's been in the ER with me, he's been in recovery rooms with me, and we're seeing more and more people. I've had people ask me, hey, can you get a vest so I can put it on my Bichon? I'm like, no. But they're just ordering this stuff offline. So it's anywhere from $25 to $75, and they give them an ID card. ADA doesn't require an ID card. And so we find these animals, and I go to Target quite a bit, and I've seen animals, pardon my expression, but pee on end caps of clothes and stuff. And the business doesn't know that they can ask that person to leave, because the dogs have to be trained to go to the bathroom. That's one of the things they have. But I've seen them in baby strollers, saying they're service dogs. I've seen them in, you guys call them carts, but down south we call them buggies, in Target. I've had a schnauzer in an online cape lunge and bark, but he was in a buggy, so he couldn't get to Brody. And my dog just looked to the left quietly and kept on going. I had a lady reach out to me at the end of the aisle, and she goes, if ever I needed a service dog, I would get it from where you got yours, because I sure don't want one like that. And it makes it really, really difficult for those of us that have legitimate service dogs to go into businesses after a fake dog has been there. We get questioned. They don't know the questions that the ADA allows them to ask. And it's making a 10-minute trip into Target an hour. I think that if this bill passes, where we are at least able to identify them. Now, the Minneapolis police are trained now. Hold on, the Minneapolis police are trained to look at what the dog is doing, what the dog is presenting as. So if the dog is behaving like Brody, who will be quiet and sit and stay under this table till I tell him to get up, it's not an issue. But the police know that if they've got a barky, lungy dog, it's treated like a barky, lungy dog. It's asked to leave, and if it continues outside, they'll call animal control. It makes sense to me to pass this because it's becoming prevalent. I've had my dog for 8 years, and in the last 3 years, I have run across so many fake dogs that it's ridiculous. I've reported it to management, but they're afraid to do anything for the fear of being sued. And these dogs cost $25,000, and there's a Minnesota statute that if a dog attacks my dog and he is no longer able to perform his duty, then that person's on the hook for medical bills and $25,000 for me to get another service dog. But I gotta tell you, this dog is so attached to me. This dog sleeps with me. He alerts to seizures. He's the first dog in the world trained to activate a device I have in my chest with a magnet he wears on his collar, and it will stop my seizure. He has his own PR rep with Cyberonics. So replacing him would be very difficult for me. He's not a pet. I tell the police he is a piece of medical equipment. But the truth be told, he's a lifesaver for me. And he's one of a kind, and they're not going to come along and just replace it with another lab. That all the time that we've spent together, we've got shorthand commands. He listens really well. I just feel that we need something in place so to help the police be able to identify these dogs and get them out. That's what I have to do. Do you have any questions for me?
Thank you. Representative Considine?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So the way to identify them is by their behavior?
That is the only way you can identify them according to the ADA, is by the behavior of the animal.
I was in the bank last year in a pair of shorts and got quite a surprise from behind. And when I turned around, the woman went, "It's a service dog." And my response was, I thought they were better behaved than that. And she insisted it was still a service dog. So,
And we run into that, and that's what they tell the businesses. So it really boils down to how the dog behaves. Unfortunately, there's not a lot of teeth in the ADA. It's a lot of gray area. So if it's lunging, barking, because we have people that have had service dogs bite people. That's not a service dog. This dog, he's non-aggressive. The aggressiveness has been bred out of him. If he sees a puppy, he won't even go near a dog until it's 3 months old. If he sees a puppy, he's behind me with his head between my legs. So they're not aggressive in any way, shape, or form, and they're very inobtrusive.
thank you. Thank you for bringing the bill forward, Representative Green.
Representative Pinto?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I was going to ask this at some point, so it seemed like a good time now. I think that the ADA definition of service animal is limited to dogs. I don't know if
It is, with one exception, which is a mini horse. And the mini horse can't be any bigger than Brody. Brody weighs 90 pounds. And they did in 2011, they changed it to the actual definition of a service dog is all they accept. So they did away with the birds and the snakes and the gophers and all that stuff. They did away with all of that. But emotional support animals, their psychiatrists can write a prescription that they need to allow their pet to come into an apartment that doesn't accept pets. And that emotional support animal can't leave that apartment with that person.
So maybe, Mr. Chair, I guess if this does move forward, the bill is written as service animals, but if service animals under the ADA is just dogs, it does seem like it gets kind of confusing. We start thinking about other animals, and for purposes of notice and other things, if that really is all it is just
primarily
dogs, then maybe dogs and I guess mini horses, it sounds like. So
I haven't ever run across one in 8 years, but they use them periodically in rural areas because they last 35 years versus 14 or 15 for the service dog.
Okay. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
There's two questions that you can ask a person with a service dog if they have an invisible disability like I do. One question is that a service dog required for a disability? Well, I'll say yes. What task has that dog been trained to do for you? I can name 1 or 2 or 3. It's up to me. Generally, I tell him he reminds me to take medication. I don't go into the whole implant thing. Anything else?
Representative Becker.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And actually, your comment, I was going to ask this later, but your comment kind of gets to this. One concern I have is how enforcement of this would work. And just to share with folks, my brother has a physical disability. He has a service dog from Can Do Canines. You know, and so I know full well the value of that animal and how it was trained specifically to work with him. And, you know, it's $25,000 plus to train these animals. So I'm definitely, you know, we've seen the problems that there are when other people bring animals places they shouldn't be. My concern, though, is that if it's now a crime, I would hope that we could do something to make sure that the folks that are out there with their legitimate service dogs are not now, you know, having staff at a business come up to them and kind of really question, well, you're breaking the law. That's not a, you know, I don't want to make it any harder for people with disabilities to be out in the community and live their lives. And so I noticed on the handout here that there's, you know, that this bill is supported by a lot of business groups. And so I guess I would encourage Representative Green and others to maybe look at putting some money into training employees and really making sure people understand this, that we're not making this so that folks with legitimate service dogs don't feel like they're criminals now, are going to be accused of being criminals when they're out in the community living their lives.
In this bill that Representative Green placed, he has reached out to the Minneapolis Disability Council to come up with a pamphlet to give to businesses so that they're more aware of what the 2 questions are. Now, when I go to Sam's Club, they ask me what the 2 questions are, or let's just use the casino. I went to a casino, Mystic Lake. The security guard asked me the proper 2 questions. She radioed every other security guard that was in the casino, so I was never approached again. And that's a big deal to me. That was really, it made my evening much more pleasant.
Representative Beckerman.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I'm glad that you've had that positive experience, but and I'm thankful that Minneapolis is being proactive, but most of us here represent more than Minneapolis.
Absolutely.
And so especially as I'm seeing here, you know, resorts and lodging association, and, you know, these are all resorts and campgrounds, all these groups really are working with people all across Minnesota. So to be in the bill specifically, but I'm concerned about criminalizing, it feeling like you're criminalizing people being out there with their service animals. I'm familiar with the ADA, and we we fail to enforce it most of the time and to know what it actually says, but.
Has your brother been denied access? I've been denied access because of a dog that was in there barking and bit a person. And
Well, and that's Mr. Chair, that's enforcement of something else that failed to happen. And so I'm just not, I just want to be careful that we're getting to a result that's actually going to fix the problem that exists and not creating more problems.
I hear you.
Representative Howe?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I guess my concern is we're basing the criminality on this on the proper answer of two questions. Instead of, I would think that we'd start with the training requirements to train a service dog, and then an issuance of something that the person has, a document that they have, so they can prove that it's a service animal. I think we've started on the criminal side, and we're going to punish people prior to requiring that we have training requirements for these people that are training the animal, and a card or a document that these people get when they get a service animal, which would be much, to me, a better approach than let's start with the criminal side, because there's going to be all kinds of people from other states, especially when you talk about resorts and everything else, that all of a sudden they're going to be put in a difficult position, when I believe that we should start with the training requirement and go to the places that are providing the training of these animals, and a document produced that says it's a service animal prior to coming out and putting penalties on folks. I guess that's where my concern lies.
Can I answer to that? The ADA does not allow documentation to be shown. You can't ask for it at all.
Representative Howe?
Can-Do Canines, Helping Paws, some of your bigger organizations that belong to Assistance Dogs International do provide us with an ID card with my picture on one side and Brody's picture on the other. However, we're told we're not to use that unless we're going to jail or something, you know. But they're not allowed to ask for that. They have to respond totally on the demeanor of that animal, which is why doing this will help, I think, some of the folks, those of us that have legitimate service dogs, because we are getting hit with it. We feel like we're pinballs.
If I could, Mr. Chair, just answer that as well. Is it okay?
Yep.
Okay, I'll be quick.
We're very short of time here.
Representative Howe, Mr. Chair, these things were all discussed. And one of the things that it was difficult, and the reason it took me so long to get this bill moving, is because we have to comply with the ADA laws. We cannot bypass them, or we have other problems. So, and the penalties, and also to Representative Becker-Finn's comments, I haven't had one person that has a legitimate service dog come to me and say, I'm afraid of this. This came to me by a lady who actually had to have her dog put down because it was attacked by a fake service dog. That's how it came to my attention. So I think those questions are answered in the bill, and I think that we've tried to work around what existing law is.
Representative Hilstrom?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So, Representative Green, we received information from Legal Aid of a different method in which we could address the same issue, and they advocated potentially using the trespass statute instead, right? The first time someone's there that shouldn't be, they're trespassed, the animal is trespassed, and then the second time they'd come back, it would actually be a crime under the regular trespassing statute. Is there a reason you didn't go down that path instead of creating a whole new crime of this? I think you can get there with, current law, or maybe a slight modification of current law, which would be much easier to deal with and much easier to prosecute. I've actually had someone who had in court who had a fake service animal, and so I understand. The challenge is when you have someone who may be suffering from some mental illnesses or some other difficulties that may cause them to have the inability to evaluate whether or not it is a real service animal, that would give the person or the owner of the property the ability to say, you just can't bring that animal back because it's not. And then if they bring it back, would have the ability to deal with it in a trespass way. Is there a reason you didn't go down that path instead of this whole new, some of these definitions are a little loose. Some of them are a little difficult, I think, to implement with folks who are not trained, and not everyone is going to have the ability to be as trained as they've done a good job in Minneapolis.
Representative Green?
Thank you, Mr. Chair and Representative. I did read through the proposal that came. It seemed more vague than even my bill. My goal is to try to get a simple bill through that will not only comply with ADA, but also get the sticker for the businesses and hopefully try to prevent these things. And when you started talking the trespassing law and all the other stuff that was in there and the different definitions, it seemed like it would be more confusing than just having a simple, straightforward, this is where we're going to go. It's legal to take this route. And I think the other way would be more confusing than this, and we would be right back, and we'd be still talking about this next year when I think it's an important issue to move forward.
Mr. Chair, maybe I'll ask a question after legal aid comes and testifies, once they've given their presentation as well.
Okay. Members, we have another bill to do, and we have 8 minutes. I'm going to ask that all questions be done at the end of after the testifiers.
I wasn't.
Beth Cantor.
She's coming. Come on, hurry up.
Under, down. Lay down. Hi, my name is Beth Cantor, and I also have a lot of problems with fake service dogs. Every day I have an issue. It's not always that I see a fake service dog, but I will meet someone every single day that has met a fake service dog, and that affects my accessibility rights every day. And I can tell you stories of how many times I've run into them, having them gnash their teeth at me or interfere with Dazzle's work. She's used to walking past other dogs and ignoring them, but it's pretty hard when they're trying to bite her head off. She runs between my legs and tries not to trip me. I have MS, and I get around pretty well, but it's hard when a dog is trying to fend for her life. Can I just, since I know you're short on time, I really welcome this bill. I have trouble with accessibility laws. When I have trouble with accessibility laws, I love the idea of the awareness. Then there doesn't seem to be a moral compass for people anymore. They want to bring their dogs with because it's fun. I have to bring my dog with because I'm disabled. And people want to bring their dogs because they love their dogs, but I have to bring my dog with. And she's irreplaceable. And since there's not a moral compass, there needs to be a legal one. And that's what I'm asking.
Thank you.
When I do talk to people, they run out of the store, and that's where I don't know that the trespass law would work. The stores are terrified that they're going to get sued. I speak to a lot of businesses. They want this to end. We want it to end. So, I know you're short on time, so I don't want to keep you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Come on, baby.
Left the Ron Elwood, Justin Page, and Chad Wilson. Go ahead.
Thank you, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. Ron Elwood with Legal Aid, and with me is Chad Wilson from our Legal Aid's Minnesota Disability Law Center, and Justin Page, also both are staff attorneys. We don't have a lot of time, and I was hoping to go through the bill with a lot of technical suggestions, but we don't have that time. So I'll do this. First of all, we would respectfully disagree with Representative Green in the sense that we believe the approach that Representative Hillstrom talked about is not more complicated, and in fact actually creates much more bright lines is much more clear and would both protect the rights of our clients with disabilities and businesses. So that's one thing. Second of all, of course, we support this concept and the intent. We, as everyone, condemn the spurious act of misrepresenting a service animal, and we seek to address and prevent this behavior, just as Representative Green does. We just think we want to take a different path to the same destination, and I think Representative Howe's comments earlier go to some degree to what we're talking about. So I'm happy to answer questions. I know you have another bill, so I'm not going to go through the lengthy technical analysis that I was going to do. But I would respectfully ask that since we didn't really have any time here to present our proposal and to analyze the bill for you, that you would table this bill for today and let us come back and explain to you the problems that we see technically with the bill, and also to explain the approach that we have rather than creating a new crime to use an existing crime to get to the same place.
Any questions from the committee? Representative Dean?
This isn't necessarily for the current testifier, but for the bill author. When I look at the bill, I see some things that are a little bit concerning. One, a petty misdemeanor is not a crime, and yet when you have the notice that must be posted in a conspicuous place, you say service animals welcome. It is a misdemeanor for a person, and it doesn't become a misdemeanor for that person until the second time. I understand the intent of that, but I mean, we need to be very consistent on what we're doing with what we pass as legislation, and then how we have, you know, notice to the public of what this is. I certainly understand that the concern of those individuals who have service animals and the situations that they're in, but I would actually agree that we should consider tabling this and have a more thorough hearing, and then also make some of the changes that may need to be made, even if it stays in this form, to make sure that it's tight, so that we're not having contradictions in it.
Mr. Chair.
Representative O'Neill?
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I would just remind the committee that the next committee stop is civil law, and so it will get in.
No,
It's not go-
this is going to the general register.
It's going to, okay, because it was on the calendar for tomorrow for civil law, I
A
believe.
different bill.
Very good. So, okay, I apologize. I thought that was the same bill. Thank you.
Any other questions from members? Due to a few concerns, but I want to be involved in this as well, I'm going to make a motion to lay the, I am going to be making a motion, not at this time, to lay the bill on the table for now. But I do want to remind the people about the trespass aspect of it, where I feel that doesn't work. You can be asked to leave in 14 different stores, and you'd never get charged with it. You could continue going along, unless you go back to that same store, after, and I think it's 6 months, you can go back in there and they have to ask you to leave, or they will trespass you. It's a pattern that could continue, where these people are still going to be falsely using dogs and misrepresenting them and giving the good service dogs we have a bad name. That's my concern about using the trespass law. And with that, I make a motion to lay the bill on the table. Oh, or just lay it over. Just lay it over.
Thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee. Thank you very much.
I'm going to lay the bill over.